24-year-old Emmanuel Ofori is a maize farmer whose 4-acre land is due for harvesting. He cultivates yellow corn because of its high demand and prices in recent times.
With this farm, I will harvest, dry them well, and store until maize is scarce on the market. Then I sell them. Now, a bucket is 25 cedis, but I will wait and sell at 30 cedis in the lean season.
Now the back way 25.
The biggest headache, perhaps for Emmanuel and other farmers in Ghana, arise after harvesting. That's the drying and storage. Large quantities of farm produce goes bad when these are poorly handled, depending on the weather, leaving the farmer with little for only subsistence after all the sweat and toil. Statistics show at least 30% of farm produce in Ghana goes waste annually. Senior lecturer at the Department of Agricultural Engineering, Joseph Opon Akowa, explains why it is so.
These moisture content is the amount of water in the produce. At harvest, it is about 25 thereabout. And so what it means is that because the water is in the maize, you cannot keep it for a long time, so you have to dry it. And so we can talk about drying losses. So you're not able to dry it effectively, so you cannot store this produce for a long time. So one has to do with lack of technology. In this sense, you are talking about drying, facilities. And this has been a major challenge, particularly because most of our farmers are smallholder farmers who obviously may not have the means to afford these big drying systems that are centralized in their communities. So one way we can avoid or prevent post-harvest losses is to make small drying facilities that are not so expensive available to these farmers.
Depending on the geographical location and other factors, farmers employ different drying methods. Here at Banka, in the Kwewu West municipality in the eastern region, I meet 25-year-old farmer Kweju Fori. He uses traditional mechanisms to dry his harvested maize.
When we bring the harvested maize home, we keep them on the barn and set fire beneath it all the time. The maize in my kitchen is almost a year old and ready to be used. Some will spoil and others will dry well. Sometimes during the 7th and 8th month, we bring them down to either sell or replant them.
In his kitchen is this elevated barn under which he keeps a cooking pot that generates heat to facilitate the process of drying his maize. So in here is a traditional mechanism for drying and storing maize. In there is a bunch of harvested maize which has undergone this particular mechanism for more than a year. We are told it is 80% effective in reducing the moisture content of the maize as it undergoes this particular process. We are told that after this period, it is now ready for replanting and for other uses.
Oh, my fan say 100 crown now. My fan say whatever. My fan say 20 and say.
Let's say it's 100%. Often we lose about 20%. It is because it is often attacked by weevils. Mostly this happens when you are not consistent with fire you put beneath the barn.
This method is popular here in this community. The 20% loss to either weevils or molds sometimes results in aflatoxins, which is dangerous to the human health. Engineer Opon Akowa explains.
Because the grain is not well dried, there's this we call molds. Sometimes you will see this green, material or substance growing on your maize. That is what we call scientifically, we call them molds. These molds are precursors to the growth of or the introduction of aflatoxins in your produce. So it is critical as a farmer to make sure that you can dry your grain to the barest minimum. For maize, we normally recommend they dry it to about 12% moisture content if they want to store it for a long time. 14% if they want to process it for food is okay. Aflatoxins are very, very, very dangerous. They can even lead to death. Studies have shown that in instances where we talk about hepatitis B and all those liver-related problems, it can be linked to aflatoxins in terms of consuming, grains that are contaminated with aflatoxins. So,
back at Kwewu Banka, Emmanuel Ofori is drying his maize, but on this drying platform, also used to dry cocoa beans. Though this method appears more advanced than Kweju uses, it does causes losses as well.
I dry it this way because it can last for even a year. No pest can get into it after it is dried. With this, I might not even lose any of them. When it rains intermittently, it will take a month to dry, but if it is sunny all through, then it will take about 2 weeks to dry.
So we are more than 1 month. If you are in Suba, now I sign by phone on tea. I do Katabe 1 month. So we are body and the 2 weeks.
After almost a month, the maize is ready for storage. Ima then keeps it in a blue polythene sacks, tied at the edge and kept in airy places with the hope of preventing molds and weevil infestation. Though it works to a certain extent, it hardly produces the desired results.
To do with the current system they are using to store their grains in terms of maize, they use what we call the PP or the polypropylene bags, which obviously are not that they are not good, but then they are susceptible to insect infestation, because these insects will thrive in an area where there's oxygen and also where the food is available and there's moisture. When you look at these 3 containers that we have on my table, this one has a cap which is totally closed, so you can't see any hole through it. This also has a cap, but we've cut through the cap and then we've put a cloth. So it means that though it's covered, the cloth is permeable to allow oxygen to penetrate through it. And this one obviously also is the same. If you look at the quality of this grain in terms of what the insects and molds have done to it, and then you compare it to this, obviously then you appreciate what we mean by trying to use the hermetic technology which we are encouraging farmers to adopt. The idea is that because there is that opportunity for oxygen to get into this container, if there are 1 or 2 or 3 insects in there, they are able to reproduce, lay eggs. So over a short time, you get multiples of them, and then the idea is that they will be feeding on your grain. And as they feed, even if your grain is dried, because they are more or less biological organisms, they respire and produce moisture. And so as they eat the grain and produce moisture over time, this is what you get. You realize that your grain will be totally destroyed because they are.
Engineer Opon Akowa alludes to use of specially designed zero-fly hermetic bag designed for this purpose.
So we have what we call hermetic bags. One of them is a zero-fly, hermetic bag, which has a liner, and then the bag itself is incorporated with deltamethrin, which prevents mice and then these insects from even coming closer to it. And so if we can introduce our farmers to some of these simple storage systems, then already we are able to prevent, or in a way we are cutting off this infestation, and therefore we can curtail or reduce or prevent post-harvest losses as far as grains are concerned.
One way to address the challenge is to keep a required moisture content in the grains at a reasonable 12%.
So GrainMate started as a research project that I worked on while I was doing my national service in KNUST. And so the research was basically to look at what affordable solutions we could develop to solve the problem of high moisture content, which was like a major component of post-harvest losses in grains in sub-Saharan Africa. So the research phase was very successful, and the results were good. So out of that, we decided that we would not let this thing die as a research project. We're going to commercialize it. We're going to turn a students' research project into a viable business, and that was how Sesi Technologies came about.
At Ayeduase, near KNUST, this challenge is what agric engineering graduate Isaac Sesi is addressing.
So GrainMate is made up of two parts. There's the handheld device and there's the probe. So the probe has a sensor that you put into the bag of grain that you're testing for. You connect it to the handheld device, and then you select the grain you are testing for, and it tells you the moisture content in that selected grain type after a while. So it currently supports corn, soya bean, sorghum, rice, and wheat, and we're actually developing equations and algorithms for other crops. So eventually we see it supporting groundnut, millet, maybe cocoa, coffee, and then other, high value crops that come up as we go along. Yeah.
He has developed a technology to measure moisture content of grains. To experiment how the device works, Isaac put the device into a container full of maize with high level of moisture.
So we measured the moisture content of a sample of corn, and we determined that the moisture content was 14.5 with the GrainMate, and that is very high for corn. Usually the highest moisture content should be around 12, which means anything above 12, 13 it means that your grain is too wet. And if you're storing this, as you can see, after a while, if the moisture content is that high, after a while you see all of these weevils in there. You store for a little bit more, and by the time you come back, all of your grains has become powder, which you probably don't want. There are lots of implications of that. If you are storing grains, that is economic loss for you, because the weight is going to reduce, the quality is going to reduce. When the mold, gets in there too, it means that the aflatoxin concentration is going to go high, so it becomes unsafe generally for consumption.
Yam seed availability in Ghana is a major constraint, as is estimated to account for between 40 to 50% of cultivation cost. Aeroponics, a method of growing plants in a soil-less air environment with nutrient water, has been tested and proven effective in yam seed production. Hydroponics involves use of nutrient solution to grow yam seedlings in a specified medium under the greenhouse conditions. Both methods have been found to generate disease-free seeds. The project, known as Yam Improvement for Incomes and Food Security in West Africa, is in its second phase in Ghana and Nigeria as implementing countries. Spearheaded by the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, it seeks to increase yam production by 30%. Professor Quinn calls on government and development partners to invest in the technology.
We have had yams grown over the years, and it's unfortunate that we don't have a rigid, vibrant seed yam system. So this project is introducing a vibrant, clean seed yam system in Ghana. We want to make sure that as we distribute planting material, we don't distribute diseased plant material. We distribute clean planting material all over Ghana, and you use innovative high-ratio propagation methods, such as the aeroponics, hydroponics, and temporary bioreactor systems to rapidly multiply clean materials for dissemination all across. With this, you are assured of over 30% increase in your productivity. Unlike the use of the edible tuber that you use as seed, this will set aside a clean seed system for yam productivity in the country.
Executive Director, Forum for Agriculture Research in Africa, Dr. Yemi Akimbamijo, underscored the importance of science and technology in agricultural development. He says it's crucial in Africa's quest to feed its growing population.
And I'm particularly impressed by what I've seen today because of one thing. It has demonstrated that science is crucial in agricultural development. And this is the whole essence of FARA. FARA is the hosting institution for the science agenda for agriculture in Africa. And what we are saying is that we have come to a point where we necessarily must deploy science in agricultural production in Africa. As you know, Africa is the most science deficient agricultural production system in the world. And this is not how we're going to feed the 1.3 billion people expected in a couple of years. So we need to get our
for JoyNews,
and the kind of
Deborah.
I was a hardware dealer before I ventured into the farming, so I invested the money on me into the business. If you want to venture into this business, you have to have enough money because things are difficult. If you don't have money, your business will not flourish.
Kofi Entry started his farm with 2,000 birds 7 years ago. Now he has 7,000, from which he collects 170 crates of eggs daily. The 51-year-old acknowledges the capital-intensive venture is profitable.
Sometimes we make profit from the sale of the eggs. I am able to get between 170 and 180 crates of eggs a day, and customers rushed to buy them. But sometimes I hardly get people to come and buy. Yesterday, for instance, I had a lot of eggs, but no one came to buy. I had to beg someone to buy them on credit.
Mr. Entry has no regrets going into poultry farming, but he says growing cost of production is becoming a disincentive.
I am not going to quit this business. I still have hopes because almost every business has its challenges. I am not going to base on these challenges and quit.
He says it takes a minimum of 30,000 cedis to raise 1,000 birds.
To raise a single bed, you would need 30 cedis.
This will get 30,000. Not Dana ready. Dana ready. Drinkers and feeders.
So if you want to start with 1,000 bears, you will need about 30,000 cedis. If it is 500 bears, then you would have to spend 15,000 cedis till they begin to lay eggs.
Who will feed us? And the drinkers. Construction of average-sized structures for the birds will cost at least 15,000 cedis.
If you want to start with 1,000 birds, you need at least 15,000 cedis to raise a structure for them.
Ms. Entry is also worried about importation of birds due to unreliable sources of day-old chicks.
The problem is almost all the raw materials are imported. Even the day-old chicks are imported from Holland because those from Kumasi are not the best.
Nonetheless, Ms. Entry is undeterred even in the face of falling demand for the price of eggs. Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin's report for JoyNews.